The Atari Dominion ruled the galaxy with an iron claw. 9 feet of reptilian muscle, bred for war, unchallenged for millennia. Their fleets darkened the skies of conquered worlds, their names spoken in hushed whispers across the stars. They were not just strong, they were the strongest. The idea that anyone, let alone a species as insignificant as humanity, could ever oppose them was laughable. Until the day they made a mistake. Luna Yaga stood before the Galactic Council, her presence a quiet defiance. She was not a soldier, not a warrior. She had never held a weapon in her life. Yet she stood where no human had ever stood before, speaking words that no one had dared utter to the Atari, a plea for peace. Her voice was steady. Humanity does not seek war. We wish to coexist, to learn, to share. The days of conquest, of bloodshed for the sake of power, those days should be behind us. We ask for understanding. Silence filled the chamber, and then laughter. General Nortak, Supreme Commander of the Atari Dominion's military forces, leaned forward, the ridges of his scaled face pulling into a cruel grin. Peace. His voice was like grinding metal. You come here a soft-skinned mammal, and think your words mean anything? Luna did not flinch. It's not weakness to seek peace. Nortak chuckled, turning to the assembled delegates of other species. Humans. Always amusing. He stood, towering over her, the deep crimson of his war cloak pooling at his feet. Your species is young. You have not yet learned that the strong dictate the terms. The weak do not make requests. I would not call humanity weak, Luna replied, her tone firm. We endure. We adapt. Nortak's grin widened. And yet, you kneel before us. That is why the Atari will always rule. He turned to the council. There will be no treaty, no peace, only the continued expansion of our domain. Luna took a slow breath. She had known this might happen. She had hoped otherwise. You cannot subjugate everyone forever. Nortak's amusement faded. And you cannot change the nature of the universe, little diplomat. She met his gaze. The universe has a way of surprising those who think they control it. 2 days later, she was dead. The execution was public. A statement. A warning. The footage was broadcast across the galaxy. A frail human woman standing on the execution platform, defiant to the last breath. The Atari did not even see it as murder. In their eyes, they had merely removed an annoyance. The universe turned, unchanged. Or so they thought. The news reached Earth in mere hours. Politicians raged. The media erupted. Governments debated action, but ultimately knew their hands were tied. They could not challenge the Atari. To do so would mean annihilation. But one man did not care about consequences. Baba Yaga sat in the dimly lit corner of a rundown bar in New York, his fingers wrapped around a glass of bourbon. He had been out. Done. A quiet life, away from a world he had spent years surviving. Luna had given him that peace. She had been his reason to stop, to be something more than a weapon. And now she was gone. The bartender hesitated as he set another drink down. Baba, he said cautiously, I heard what happened. Baba's eyes flicked up, and the bartender swallowed hard. There was something there, something ancient and unrelenting. You okay? The bartender asked. Baba drained his glass in one slow motion. Then he stood. Where's my suit? The underworld moved fast. Faster than any government, any military. The moment Baba Yaga re-emerged, the whispers started. He visited a man known only as the broker, a shadow among criminals, the one who knew things no one else did. You're looking for a ghost, Baba, the broker said, handing over a data chip. Atari security is impenetrable. No human has ever infiltrated one of their strongholds, let alone killed one of their officers. Baba took the chip. That's about to change. The broker sighed, rubbing his temples. They executed her publicly. They made a statement. If you do this, you won't just be going after one warlord. The entire Dominion will come for you. Baba's expression didn't change. Good. The broker leaned back, exhaling slowly. All right. You're looking for General Nortak. He's aboard a Exatari war station orbiting Garvok. Heavy security. And Baba, he's not human. He won't fight fair. Baba Yaga stood. Neither do I. The ship he stole was barely space-worthy. A rusted freighter, stripped for parts, and barely held together by outdated Earth tech. It didn't matter. It had engines. It had a destination. That was all he needed. As he soared past Mars, the first warning reached the Exatari. Sir, an officer reported to Nortak aboard his battle station. We intercepted a transmission. A human has stolen a ship. It's headed in our direction. Nortak barely looked up from his meal. And the officer hesitated. It's Baba Yaga. Nortak paused. Who? Baba Yaga, sir. The general squinted. That name means nothing to me. The officer swallowed. It should. Nortak chuckled. One man. Coming here? Alone. The officer nodded. Nortak waved dismissively. Then we'll kill him like we did his woman. The officer didn't reply. He had seen the reports, the intercepted messages from the underworld. He had heard the fear in voices of those who had whispered that name. He didn't know who Baba Yaga was, but he knew one thing. The people who did were terrified. Baba Yaga reached the Exatari station in under a day. They saw him coming. They locked onto his ship, fired warning shots, demanded his surrender. Baba ignored them. He landed the freighter in the docking bay without permission. The alarms blared. Exatari warriors stormed in, weapons raised. Baba Yaga stepped out. No armor. No grand battle suit. Just a man in a tailored black suit, his face unreadable. A Exatari soldier sneered. You think you can? Baba shot him in the head. The room erupted. Plasma bolts tore through the air, but Baba was faster. He moved like death incarnate, weaving between shots, returning fire with pinpoint accuracy. He disarmed Exatari with a single twist, drove his own knife into the alien's throat, spun to shoot another in the knee before finishing him with a headshot. The alarm spread through the station. More soldiers rushed in. They died. The security feeds sent images to the command center. Nortak watched in disbelief as his elite warriors, trained since birth, superior in every measurable way, fell like children before a storm. This, he muttered, eyes narrowing. This isn't possible. His second-in-command turned to him, voice trembling. Sir, I think we just made an enemy we cannot kill. Nortak snarled. Then we throw everything at him. By the time reinforcements arrived, Baba Yaga had already moved deeper into the station, cutting through opposition like a force of nature. He did not stop. He did not hesitate. And in the depths of the war station, Nortak, the proud, undefeated general of the strongest species in the galaxy, felt something he had never felt before. Fear. The corridors of the Exatari war station were painted in shadow and fire. The once sterile walls now bore the scars of combat, gouges from plasma fire, blood splatters both red and blue, bodies of warriors who had believed themselves invincible. Their last mistake. Baba Yaga moved with mechanical precision, reloading as he walked, his eyes scanning for the next threat, his expression unreadable. The alarms blared. The station's AI barked out frantic security warnings in guttural Exatari dialects. Surviving soldiers whispered among themselves, their hands shaking over triggers. Some hesitated to move forward. They had seen the footage. One of their own, a decorated warrior, had fired at the human. A clean shot, center mass. The human had twisted at the last second, impossible speed, the bolt grazing past him as he put a bullet between the warrior's eyes. This was not how combat worked. The Exatari were superior, always had been. Yet their best were falling faster than they could react. Nortak stood in the war room, eyes locked on the security feeds. He watched as the humans systematically took apart his forces with nothing but human weapons, ancient by galactic standards. No shields. No enhancements. Just speed, precision, and something far worse. Intent. This, Nortak muttered to himself, hands tightening into fists. This is not possible. The officers behind him exchanged glances. No one dared speak the truth aloud, but it had taken root in the room like a cancer. It was possible. It was happening. Nortak turned sharply. Send the Red Fangs. There was a moment's hesitation. Now, the Red Fangs were the Exatari's best. Elite killers, bred for assassination, trained from birth to fight in the shadows. They did not charge like common soldiers. They stalked. They ambushed. Baba Yaga sensed them before he saw them. The corridor ahead was empty, unnaturally silent. A trickle of water dripped from a ruptured pipe, hissing against exposed wiring. He stepped forward, eyes scanning every possible angle. The air shifted. He moved. A blade slashed through where his throat had been a second ago. The assassin landed in a crouch, black armor blending seamlessly with the dim lighting. No wasted motion. No hesitation. Baba shot him twice in the chest. The armor held. The assassin surged forward, his blade a blur. Baba deflected, twisting, redirecting the momentum into a counterstrike. A second assassin lunged from behind. Baba spun, firing one-handed while grappling the first attacker. The bullet hit the second assassin between the eyes, sending his body crashing to the floor. The first assassin faltered for half a second. Baba wrenched the blade from his grip and drove it into his throat. Two more emerged from the vents. Baba Yaga exhaled slowly. The Red Fangs were good. He was better. By the time Nortak received the update, the last of the Red Fangs had already been eliminated. Enough, the warlord growled. I will deal with him myself. Baba reached the war room doors. The security lockout was already engaged. Reinforced durasteel, unbreakable by human means. He holstered his gun, took a slow step back, and studied the structure. Then he pulled a small cylindrical device from his belt. A high-frequency charge. Not human technology. Acquired, not given. He planted it against the door and took another step back. A second later, the charge detonated, melting through the durasteel like ice in a furnace. The war room filled with smoke. Baba stepped inside. Nortak stood waiting. No armor. No weapons drawn. Just a warrior's stance, feet planted firmly, hands loose at his sides. The warlord studied the human before him, and for the first time in his long, bloody career, he felt uncertainty. Baba Yaga was not a soldier, not a warlord. He had no fleet, no army. He was just a man who had walked through the most secure war station in the Exatari Dominion, as if it were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Nortak bared his teeth. Do you even know who you are fighting? Baba tilted his head slightly, but said nothing. The warlord scoffed. You are nothing human. A relic. A piece of flesh that should have died on your little backwater planet. Baba stepped forward. Nortak moved. Fast. The Exatari were bigger. Stronger. Their bodies naturally armored. Their reflexes enhanced. Nortak had ended wars with his bare hands. And yet, Baba anticipated the strike, shifting just enough to let the warlord's fist skim past his head. In the same breath, he countered. 3 quick blows, each one precise. Nortak staggered back. His eyes widened. Pain. Not since his youth had he felt it. He roared, lunging again. Baba dodged. Struck again. A knee to the ribs. A knife hand to the throat. A brutal takedown. Nortak crashed to the floor. Baba pulled a gun and aimed. The warlord spat blood, glaring up at him. Killing me won't change anything. Baba's expression remained unreadable. It will for me. He pulled the trigger. The warlord jerked once, then went still. Silence. Baba exhaled. He reloaded. Then he turned and walked out. The station was in chaos. Some Exatari still fought. Others ran. A few simply stood, staring at the screens that had broadcast their general's death in real time. The unthinkable had happened. The strongest species in the galaxy had just lost to a single human. The news spread faster than light. Within hours, the galactic underworld was ablaze with whispers. A coded message reached the depths of the crime syndicates. They killed Baba Yaga's wife. The reactions varied. Some laughed at first, until they realized it was not a joke, until they saw the footage. Lord Grax, the head of the most powerful criminal syndicate in the known universe, immediately recalled every bounty he had placed on Earth-related jobs. He had no intention of being anywhere near Baba Yaga's list. A ex-Atari ambassador attempted to file an official complaint with the Galactic Council. The request was denied before it could be submitted. On the Rim worlds, an entire mercenary battalion deserted their contract with the Dominion overnight. The fear spread like a sickness. The humans, those soft, unpredictable, undisciplined creatures, had produced something that the galaxy could not comprehend. A singular force, unstoppable, unrelenting, and it was not over. The ex-Atari government scrambled for a response. Their leaders convened an emergency meeting, but none of them had an answer. The empire was vast, their fleet unmatched, but their best warriors had already fallen, and Baba Yaga was still out there, waiting. The galaxy had changed in a single night. The man in the black suit had seen to that. The galaxy had long existed under the illusion that strength was measured in numbers, in technology, in the sheer weight of an empire's might. But that illusion was breaking. It cracked the moment Nortak's lifeless body hit the floor of his own war room, and by the time the news reached the ex-Atari Dominion's high command, it was already too late to contain it. Baba Yaga had done what no species had dared attempt, not just because of fear, but because no one had believed it possible. A lone human had walked into the heart of an empire's stronghold, killed one of the most feared generals in the galaxy, and left without a scratch. That kind of thing did not happen. Not to the ex-Atari, not to the rulers of war. And yet it had. The aftermath was immediate and devastating. The Dominion scrambled to reassert control, sending a fleet to retake the war station. When they arrived, they found a husk of what had once been an impenetrable fortress. The station's crew had either fled, died fighting, or simply surrendered to the inevitable. The sight of Nortak's body, displayed like a warning, sent ripples through the command structure. It wasn't just the fact that he was dead. It was how it had happened. The wounds, the method. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't luck. It was methodical, calculated, deliberate. The ex-Atari could not allow this to stand. A full-scale manhunt was ordered. Baba Yaga was now the most wanted entity in the Dominion, his name broadcast across every military channel, his face displayed in war councils, where officers tried and failed to devise strategies to stop him. Yet every proposed plan carried the same flaw. He had already proven that none of their methods would work. And worse, others had taken notice. The galactic underworld, long ruled by a fragile balance of fear and respect, erupted into chaos. The syndicates, the mercenary factions, the criminal enterprises that had spent centuries navigating power shifts, suddenly found themselves facing a new variable. Some saw opportunity. If a single human could destabilize the mighty ex-Atari, perhaps the Dominion was not as invincible as it had seemed. Pirates raided weakened ex-Atari outposts. Rival species, long cowed into submission, began whispering of rebellion. But the most dangerous shift was the one no one had anticipated. There was no open declaration, no formal alliance. But across the galaxy, a silent understanding began to form. No one was going to interfere, not because they supported Baba Yaga, because they were terrified of him. A bounty of unprecedented value was placed on his head, a fortune that could buy entire fleets. It was meant to be a trap, an irresistible lure for the deadliest hunters in the galaxy. Instead, it became a death sentence for anyone foolish enough to accept it. The first to try was a Vortha execution squad, cybernetically enhanced assassins who had never failed a contract. They tracked Yaga to a derelict space station on the edge of an asteroid field, moving in with silent precision. They had studied his tactics, anticipated his movements. They had accounted for everything, except the reality of facing him. The station's artificial gravity flickered. Shadows stretched unnaturally in the dim emergency lighting. The assassins moved as one, spreading out, each taking a position that should have ensured victory. They lasted 8 minutes. By the time their distress signal was intercepted, all that remained to them were scattered weapons and the slow, drifting corpses pulled by the station's weak gravity. Other hunters followed, some believing themselves smarter, more prepared. A reptilian warlord, infamous for slaughtering entire colonies, brought a personal army. They landed on a remote moon, believing they had trapped Yaga in a no-win scenario. They were wrong. The warlord's final transmission contained nothing but static and gunfire. The bounty was not claimed. The names of those who tried disappeared from galactic records. Their bodies never recovered. One by one, the Dominion's best fell into the same abyss, swallowed whole by the void that Baba Yaga had become. The situation spiraled beyond control. A ripple effect spread through the Dominion's political structure. Lesser officers, seeing the writing on the wall, abandoned their posts. Commanders defected. Some pretended to be dead, erasing their own records in a desperate attempt to avoid ever encountering the human. In the Dominion's War Council, Supreme Chancellor Varthun stood over a tactical display, his scaled fingers tapping against the console in measured thought. He was not Nortec. He did not revel in combat for the sake of dominance. He was a strategist, a ruler who had kept the Dominion strong not just through war, but through calculated, merciless decisions. He studied the reports, the casualty lists, the intercepted transmissions from terrified outposts. He had seen empires fall before. He had orchestrated the collapse of lesser civilizations himself. But this was something new. This cannot continue, Varthun said at last, his voice low, dangerous. One of his advisors, a nervous-looking intelligence officer, hesitated before speaking. Chancellor, we have deployed every available resource. We have used strategies effective against entire armies, and yet one man still walks, Varthun finished. The advisor swallowed hard. Yes. Varthun's eyes flickered to the holographic display. A list of planets, territories, trade routes. Places where Exatari influence was now waning, where old enemies were beginning to move, sensing weakness. One man should not have been able to do this. And yet, Baba Yaga had. The Chancellor exhaled slowly. Then, with a decisive motion, he turned off the display. Send word, he commanded. The bounty is rescinded. No further actions are to be taken against the human. The War Council fell into stunned silence. One of the generals leaned forward, disbelief written across his face. Chancellor, we cannot simply. We can, Varthun interrupted. His gaze was sharp, unwavering. And we will. We have already lost. The moment Nortec fell, we lost. A grim realization settled over the room. For all their technology, their power, their dominance over lesser species, the Dominion had no answer to this. Their warships could burn planets. Their soldiers could crush armies. But they could not fight a ghost. Not one that refused to die. The order was sent. Across the galaxy, the Dominion's forces ceased their pursuit. Ships recalled, contracts nullified, broadcasts wiped clean of any mention of Baba Yaga. It was a surrender, though they would never call it that. Yet, even as the Dominion pulled back, the damage had already been done. The galaxy had changed. The old balance of power had shifted, perhaps irreversibly. And deep within a forgotten sector, in the quiet of a nameless system, Baba Yaga sat alone in the cockpit of a stolen starship, staring at the void beyond. His war was over. Theirs was just beginning. The bridge of the Exatari flagship was silent. The officers stood rigid, their hands hovering over controls they were too afraid to use. The air was thick with an emotion none of them had ever encountered before, dread. On the main screen, a lone vessel drifted through the void, approaching the heart of the Dominion's military command, Exatar Prime. The ship was an unremarkable Terran freighter, its hull scorched, engines flickering with the telltale signs of heavy damage. It was small, insignificant, but they knew who was inside. Baba Yaga had come. The Supreme Chancellor sat motionless in his command chair, his scaled fingers steepled before him. His breath was measured, his expression unreadable. Every calculation, every contingency, had led to this moment. He had issued the order to cease all hostilities, to recall every bounty, to sever all ties to this madness, and yet it had not stopped. Because it was never about politics, never about conquest. This was personal. The freighter pierced the last security checkpoint. Defense systems locked onto it, awaiting authorization to fire. No order came. The Chancellor knew it would make no difference. They had thrown everything at this human. Armies, assassins, fleets, the unstoppable weight of the Dominion itself. And they had failed. Baba Yaga did not negotiate. He did not accept surrender. He finished what was started. The ship landed with a bone-rattling thud in the central courtyard of the Dominion's capital. The broadcast towers, which had once relayed the executions of those who had defied the Exatari, now flickered with static. The Chancellor knew that the entire galaxy was watching. Baba Yaga emerged. The black suit was torn in places, his white shirt stained with blood, some of it his, most of it not. His expression was unreadable, the sharp angles of his face cast in the eerie glow of Exatar Prime's twin moons. Around him, hundreds of Exatari warriors stood in formation, weapons raised but hands trembling. They had seen the footage. They knew what had happened to those who had come before them. No one wanted to be the first to die. Yaga walked forward. The Chancellor rose from his throne, his robes flowing around him. His voice was calm, measured. "You've won." Baba kept walking. The Chancellor exhaled. "We rescinded the bounty. We withdrew our forces. We have surrendered." Baba stopped. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then, Yaga's voice, cold and sharp, cut through the air. "You took my wife." The Chancellor's jaw tightened. "Yes." "You broadcast it to the galaxy." A slow nod. "Yes." Baba tilted his head slightly. "You thought that would be the end of it." A flicker of something crossed the Chancellor's reptilian face. He did not deny it. Baba stepped forward. The warriors around him tensed. No one dared move. "You killed her," Baba said. "Now I bury you." The Chancellor moved first. Not because he thought he would win, but because he had no other choice. A warrior does not beg. The duel was over in seconds. A gunshot, a blade slicing through the air, a sharp intake of breath, and then the Supreme Chancellor of the Exatari Dominion fell to his knees, a hand pressed against the spreading wound in his chest. He looked up at the human who had done what no army ever could. Baba Yaga stared down at him, his gun still smoking. The Chancellor's lips parted. Perhaps he wanted to speak, to offer something, a final word, a last attempt at control. But the light faded from his eyes before he could. Baba reloaded. The Exatari warriors around them held their breath. They were the last defenders of an empire that had ruled for centuries, the pinnacle of galactic dominance. But today, they did not see an empire. They saw the end of one. Baba turned and walked away, leaving the body where it fell. No one stopped him. The Dominion collapsed within days. Without its leader, without its warlords, it crumbled like dried leaves in the wind. Former vassal states rose up. Old enemies took back stolen worlds. The mighty Exatari fleet, once the hammer of conquest, scattered across the stars, directionless and afraid. For the first time in history, there was no one left willing to fight for the Dominion. Baba Yaga had killed more than its leaders. He had killed its will. The news spread faster than any war before it. Governments restructured overnight. The Galactic Council rewrote its laws. It was an unspoken but universally understood truth. Never, under any circumstances, provoke a human. Even the criminal underworld reshaped itself. Bounty hunters refused contracts that involved Earth. Syndicates severed ties with the Dominion's remnants, fearful that even acknowledging their past alliance would be enough to invite the wrath of the man in black. The legend of Baba Yaga became something more than fact. It became a warning. There were stories, whispered in shadowed bars and backwater spaceports. Some claimed he had returned to Earth, vanishing into obscurity. Others said he still wandered the stars, a specter lurking just beyond the edge of known space. But one truth remained. There was not a single species, not a single planet, that was willing to find out if the legend was real. And so the galaxy moved on. Baba Yaga never asked for peace, but he made damn sure no one would ever take it from him again.